Today's talk is titled, So What Do We Do with the Body? To be delivered by John Loring. John received a doctorate in religious studies at Claremont. His professional career was spent mainly in the field of architecture and education. For the past 13 years, he and his wife Susan have been part-time residents in Cambria and the rest of their time in my old neighborhood of Agora Hills. He identifies himself as a devout Christian heretic. One of the peculiar things about John is that he travels in different parts of the world and he frequently seeks out old cemeteries to visit, which leads to the title of his talk, So What Do We Do with the Body?
Well, good morning. You're a tough act to follow. It's nice to be back here. I hope you're all ready for this. This weekend, people of Mexican heritage mark the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, during which they go out to cemeteries for an evening, offer flowers, light candles, food, and all in honor and memory of the departed. This weekend also marks All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, during which Roman Catholics remember their friends who may be in purgatory. So this seems like an appropriate time to talk about death. And I know this is a sensitive subject, and perhaps one to be avoided, especially as if one has been touched by a recent death. But even if this isn't so for you, it seems that in our current culture there has been a movement away from dealing with the dead directly. Think about it. In the past, when someone died, there was traditionally a time of being with the body. A friend of mine who grew up in Louisiana remembers attending the wake of her grandfather, where the body, in an open casket, an open wooden box, lay in the family parlor for 3 days as people would gather to lament, share food, and share stories. Over time, the family parlor was replaced by the funeral parlor. A little more money with this. Where the dead was present in a casket, open or closed, and a formal funeral was conducted. This was often preceded by a wake the night before and burial at the cemetery afterwards. But now, increasingly, in our very secular world, instead of a wake or even a funeral, we have what we call a celebration of life. Sometimes months or more after the person has died, with no trace of the body present, perhaps an urn full of ashes. And this is very much in contrast to how it used to be, both in our own past and throughout history. Other cultures don't seem to have a problem of being with the dead, as we see with such things as Dia de los Muertos and All Souls' Day. Whoops. Okay. In traditional houses in Peru, as an example, it is not unusual to see skulls of the ancestors displayed in niches in the living room wall. To go back to Mexico for a moment, in the old beautiful colonial town of Guanajuato, the people there quite a while back discovered that there was something about the soil in the cemetery that petrified the bodies. And so they figured, well, why not? Let's just bring them all back. And they did, and put them in a big museum with their burial clothes and all, and people go and visit the dead. That incredible Mexican culture of being with the dead. Now, in the Toraja culture in Indonesia, 3 years after a death, the practice is to exhume the body, wash it, reclothe it, even offer it a cigarette, and sit with it for a time before it is reburied. Obviously, these people do not have a problem of being with the dead. So I think this is a subject worthy of reflection, and it seems a good time to reconsider the idea of being with the dead and deal specifically with the question, so what do we do with the body? When I was 4 years old, I attended my first funeral. I remember sitting with my family, gazing at the open coffin beyond the chiffon curtain, my father lifting me up as we walked slowly past the coffin, my grandfather in repose, just an arm's length away, and later on the burial at the cemetery. That was my first answer to the question, so what do we do with the body? You put it in a fancy box and you bury it. Not really a treasure, but for a 4-year-old kid, a source of fascination and mystery. And it remains so for me. As we look through history, the body of a dead person often has had a mystique. In some ancient cultures, the cemetery, the necropolis, the city of the dead, was located on the outskirts of town because it was thought that the dead collectively would provide the first line of defense in the event of an attack. Throughout history, a body was to be honored, and this has been especially so in war. Whether you go all the way back to the Trojan War and how Hector was treated, or now the recent exchange of dead soldiers between Russia and Ukraine. The dead are paid a special reverence. Think of Ataturk's words that Sue read. Your sons are now lying in our bosom and are in peace. They have become our sons as well. People from New Zealand and Australia, countries who sent their sons, know this quote by heart. In the American Civil War, those killed in action were so important that the practice of embalming became widely used so that a body could be returned home, sometimes at a great distance. And apart from the military, even for people who are impoverished and lost and have nothing, most communities provide a place in a cemetery, Potter's Field, where they can be buried and blessed. More importantly, in many cultures, death was seen as a gateway to the next world. The dead were buried with items that were thought would be useful in their next level of existence. It's amazing how much archaeological research today focuses on tombs and the artifacts that are found in them. So for me, all this lifts up the question, what indeed do we do with the body? How do we now pay the dead honor and respect? And even if we're so inclined, how do we prepare the body for the next world? Cemeteries were once a place of solitude and beauty before they came to be about plaques in the grass. This is a cemetery in Punta Arenas, Chile, just an absolutely gorgeous place. And here is the famous Père Lachaise in Paris, which probably some of you have been to, where many notable people rest in peace, have been placed in beautiful tombs. People like Chopin, Proust, Oscar Wilde, Maria Callas, Molière, Marcel Marceau, so many other names that you would know, including some American by the name of Jim Morrison. So typically in Western culture, the body has been preserved, buried, entombed, hidden away in a cave, placed in a mausoleum, or even heavily preserved and placed in glass for all to see. Think about Lenin in Red Square, or here is Pope John the 23rd in St. Peter's. Sometimes the body finds its home in an architectural masterpiece. Cheops' place was in the heart of the Great Pyramid at Giza. Hadrian in Rome, the Castle San Angelo. Then there's Petra, Jordan, which is just a pretty amazing place. And finally, what I regard as the most beautiful building in the world, apart from being a tomb, the Taj Mahal in Agra, India. And photographs do not begin to do it justice, I can tell you that. Not all famous and powerful people, though, need a monument like this. Here's Winston Churchill's grave in a quiet country churchyard in England. And a footnote to all of this, in some cultures, both Eastern and Western, sometime after death, the bones of the deceased are removed, exhumed, placed in a small box called an ossuary, and then put in a special place. So, in answer to the question, what do we do with the body, for a good part of Western culture, burial, internment, entombment of some kind has been the common answer. There's actually one other kind of burial. It's called a sky burial, or celestial burial, practiced by Tibetan Buddhists. Here the body is put on a mountaintop. The vultures come to scavenge, and the body is transported to the heavens above. It's seen as a final gift from the dead to the living. It's not your typical burial. So in the Unitarian Universalist tradition, there are two answers to the question, what to do with the body. And one, of course, is burial, and the other is cremation. Cremation was not practiced by Jews or early Christians, and only rarely in early Greek and Roman cultures. If anything, if a body were to be burned, it was a sign of vengeance, unrighteousness, or punishment of criminals. In other cultures, though, it was widely practiced. When you travel in India, whether you're on a back road or in the middle of a big city, it is not uncommon to see a shrouded corpse being carried by a group of people on its way to a funeral pyre where the body will be burned. In the early morning in the town of Varanasi on the Ganges River, it's very common to see several bodies resting on their biers, waiting to be burned, and then the ashes would be scattered in the river. And it was considered to be a sacred thing. In our culture, however, after what's often a very private cremation, the ashes are returned to the family, which may then be placed in a special place. Sometimes they're buried, sometimes scattered at places significant to the life of the deceased. And given the high cost of more traditional burials, cremation has become ever more popular. Several years ago, I learned of a decommissioned lighthouse up on the Oregon coast, which is now being used to house people's ashes. And this is sort of a metaphor, it seems to me, sailing away, being guided by the light. I mean, just, anyway. There's actually another kind of cremation. I'm going to let you look this one up, but it is pretty fascinating. It's called water cremation or aqua cremation, legal in 14 states. And you can look it up. Aqua cremation. So now, what should I do with my body? Shall we have a vote? As Woody Allen said, I'm not afraid of dying. I just don't want to be there when it happens. When my daughter died at an early age back in 2001, we immediately got a burial plot for her at the main cemetery in Santa Barbara, where she had been born. The idea of going out where you would come in. In our grief, we bought 2 plots next to hers. And through the years, I have thought more about this. I have thought about the alternative of cremation for myself, thinking of special places where my ashes could be scattered. I don't want them smoked. But then, well, maybe. But then, a few years back, I began to hear about green burials where one's body is shrouded and put in a basket coffin and buried in the earth where it can decompose naturally over time. Now, Robert Wilkinson was telling me about the alternative here, a little variation where your body is actively composted in the earth, but all that water, Robert handled that one. So after reading Derek Askett's words on the current costs that Sue read of American burials and cremations, I've been thinking about the alternatives for myself. To me, the bottom line is to do something that will provide some honor for myself and my heirs, perhaps provide a gateway to the next world, just in case, and also leave a legacy that whatever I choose to have done with my body doesn't take away more than it would add to the continuation of life. It's a question that confronts us all. So what do we do with the body? For now, the answer for myself, all I can say is, I don't know. I do know that being comfortable with death, engaging it, and especially allowing time for grief are all vital. And this includes, I think, being with the body. In ancient times, the matter of grief was so important that images of grieving faces and figures were sometimes sculpted into the sides of the sarcophagi. And finally, again, I know that along with grief, remembering and honoring the dead is ultimately what is important. And what we do with the body should reflect this.